All right, let's get rolling. Everybody had a good week. First things first, got some new folks in here with us tonight. I guess Ryan's been here, but he's now has this new role as co-chair in training. Well, will be co-chair in training. Chance is also here with us, so we're excited to have everybody here. First things first, Classroom Renovation Committee, which is what we talked about, I think, 2 weeks ago, or no, it was last week, when we had mentioned TFSC supported basically a general idea of what we need to focus on as a university for our classroom renovations. And there's now a bigger committee being formed, and we need student representatives on it. And so Jordan and I were sitting down trying to brainstorm who that would best be, and we got some more information from Heather Mills, who is in facilities, who's overseeing this. And our representatives need to be individuals who are able to meet in the summer, so preferably people that would be here in the summer. So Lacey has kindly been voluntold to serve in that role. Wonder if anybody from this committee this year will be around this summer and would be interested in serving on the committee.
Like, how often will they meet? Like if we were going to drive up or?
Oh, I mean, not more than, I don't imagine more than once or twice. Yeah.
Yeah. Or do you have access to like a video conference?
I would say, or Zoom. Anybody can
Zoom. Yeah.
I assume Jordan, you were trying to be on the Zoom calls if we can.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people are graduating here, which makes it tough too, but somebody like Sarah Nieder.
That's a good thing. That is a good thing.
I mean, I could Zoom in, but I'll be in Pennsylvania.
Somebody like Jansen Penny would also be good.
Sure,
this place don't have internet.
It's down to 5,000, but I think
No, yeah, you're right. No, so yeah, we'll come up. Okay, well, that was not as successful as I intended it to be, but you know what? That's okay. All right. So sorry.
Where are you going to be this summer?
I have clinics starting. We don't get a summer. Those are our finals week, and we start clinic on Monday.
Yeah. You get
No break for Brett.
what are you doing this summer?
I'll be in New York. So, I mean, I could zoom in, but I'll be in
So we can find folks.
I want to go to New York.
upstate New York. So not really a cool part.
Hello?
It is. It's cool. It's different kind of
So we'll figure out. I'll say I'll let you talk to Senate. Yeah.
I'll
So
be here this summer. I just don't.
I could eventually take that responsibility.
Just kick it
On
down
the
the
road.
road, Jack.
You see that?
Just kick it down the road.
Look at that. That's no. I mean, hey. All right. So next thing on the agenda. Sorry, I didn't get this review or the fee recommendation out to you until really late last night. But I wonder if we can't take a couple minutes and step through it. Did everybody have a chance to at least glance over the review? Steven, you're not on the.
Oh, no, I got it. I didn't have a chance.
Okay,
to
cool.
answer it.
I was worried.
I was just going to ask clarification. What is this fee recommendation? Is this CTC? Is this TFSC? What is this?
Yeah, so this is part of I don't have it on the flash drive, but this is part of a bigger report. And the report includes kind of what we have every year, like a history of shared governance. And like I've added onto that to talk about our process changes this year. It includes our principles. It'll include our recommendations for tuition. It'll include our recommendations for fees. And so you're looking at one segment of the report. This is the report that TFSC gives to President Myers and Provost Director.
And me, so they help write the board.
Absolutely. We should assume you know it all, though. You know, and that that's the no. But that's.
But I use some of your language.
There you go. But no, it's to senior administration at K-State for. So for so this is how last year we put forward our recommendations, and President Myers would make his, and in consultation with everybody, of course, his recommendations or his proposal for the board regions. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, Steve, is that going to answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So, the other thing I wanted to say is that this, tried to capture our debate in here, tried to capture some of what we're talking about. But the other thing is that attached to the report each year is all the committee minutes. And I'll put a couple other attachments in here. I talked about attaching Provost Mason's letter to the committee about the engineering fee, things like that. So step through here real quick. I don't want to, send me word, grammar corrections. It's also a rough draft. I glanced over it after I had written it, so I haven't gone through it, did a final check or anything. So I apologize in advance. Start this recommendation talking about how we have this new fee proposal process, which that's the other thing I'll attach is the document we provided to the deans. Say here's why we have a new fee proposal process, and here's what that looks like. I wrote a broad scale what we did this year. So before the meeting, TFSC reviewed proposals, sent questions to deans to be addressed in presentations to the CTC. CTCs then met first with the presentation. Sorry, I won't read this word for word. Then I had to verify the vote. I talked about why TFSC verifies the vote and not evaluates the merit. Talking about what our role should be. All right. Now this is the part that I think Ryan kind of had brought up last time about, if TFSC doesn't discuss merit, then is it appropriate to talk about merit? Yeah, well, I think it's always appropriate to talk about merit in the proposal, or in our recommendation. But is it appropriate to talk about TFSC's discussion of merit? I guess if there were some concerns. So here's kind of how I tried to address that. Said, well, TFSC knows it's not our role to do that. TFSC felt, maybe this is incorrect, let me know, felt limited by its ability to evaluate and or discuss issues brought up during the CTC's discussions. Limited by its inability. So, for example, I said the College of Engineering exemplified this when TFSC members did not feel as though the CTC fully addressed the concern, which was the fact that the survey was department-wide versus college-wide. Despite having voted on the fee, however, TFSC voted to verify the CTC's vote on the grounds that, I don't really like the way I worded this, so I'm going to change this, fair one. On the grounds that TFSC could have been weighing that concern differently than the CTC, which would have erroneously taken TFSC into discussion on the merits of the proposal. Sorry, that was a lot. But the gist of what I'm saying is that we had this concern, hey, the CTC didn't, we were worried did not, address the fact that the survey data was different than what the proposal was. Ultimately, we decided to vote because the CTC followed the process and they were made aware. And for that reason, we didn't feel like we could, we didn't feel it was our role to say no because CTC, in fact, discussed that. I said, that said, in order to fully understand both CTC's and the TFSC's thought process, those concerns and discussions are included in the comments below. So I'll go into this a little bit where it talks about TFSC was concerned about X, Y, Z as addressed by that. So does that sound generally okay for this? Any glaring issues that you're running into? Yes.
Couple ideas. Third paragraph, you say that TFSC felt that it was unable to evaluate or discuss. I don't know if it might be a better way to say just it felt it was limited by its inability to vote.
Yeah. So Stephen, I would ask if it's wording. So I appreciate that. That's a great point. But send that to me in an email.
Okay.
And I think that's great. And willing to vote on that.
Okay.
I think that's good. But I want kind of today's just to be more high level.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah. I'll just sort of figure out what high level is as we go on.
Gotcha. All right. College of Engineering. Just general data. So I got this correct. TFSC approved the process and verified the CTC's vote on a vote of 92-0 with a provision, we call it that the College of Engineering communicate to students the changes as explained in concern number 3, which was in fact about the survey. Many concerns of the fee. 1, previous cost burdens of hindered accessibility. This would add to the already high cost burden. Concerns for the proposals split between instructors and tenure track faculty. Students found instructors to be of the greatest value, the educational experience. Several students indicated, I need to be clear that it's not all students who said that. Sorry, one second. Concerns that additional fee revenues was to go towards research, not educational enhancement. That sentence doesn't really read well, but that's the gist of it. 3, Surveys conducted in the fall, which were used as support for the fee, were around a department-wide fee proposal in which each department would generate revenue to hire in each department. However, as presented, the fee is college-wide, which plans to spend revenues differently than as explained when the surveys were taken. This was main concern of discussion had in TFSC over the CTC's work. See the update from Provost Mason attached to the meeting minutes. Is that fair? And the reason for supporting the fee increase is as follows. One, many students either personally experienced or heard about students who experience full class sections interfering with students' ability to graduate on time. Two, seeing limited funding resources available and, quote, nowhere else to turn while needing to move the university forward, a fee may be necessary. Three, great turnout and strong support for the fee in the survey taken in the fall, although it is different than as presented, the data shows the students generally support the plan. That was kind of the gist I got from CTC. Finally, ensuring CTC was thankful for the college learners' efforts in establishing needs-based scholarships. While there's much work to be done in providing aid to needy students, this is a step in the right direction with what they were talking about with the ICE family. So what am I missing either on concerns, support, or anything else that needs to be included as an addendum? Alrighty then. APD. Strong support stem from the need for investment in technology, which would directly benefit the student experience. There's concern with the increased cost of attendance. Robust social and financial aid ensued. Students of the CTC and CTC were pleased with your Dean Noble's comments on his commitment to needs-based aid, on their strong support in the college for a fee demonstrated through previous student survey. That's reflected really well in the minutes. Talks about how a couple of years ago, it's a couple of years ago, right? And the college had actually approved of or shown support for a fee that was higher, a fee increase that was higher, but they didn't take it forward because they were in the seat less. Is pretty much my understanding there.
Jack,
Yes.
on the APD one, I know that one of the concerns.
So what am I missing? Yeah.
Well, one of the concerns that was brought up last week was CTC selection and membership, and I feel like that kind of first happened with APD.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of that group dynamic. I don't know if that's something that we want to address and how they were all, like before even coming to that meeting, pretty unanimously in support. And it was almost like them selling it to us.
Yes.
Kind of feel. So I don't know if that's something we want to include in there.
That's a great idea. So what I want to do is tack on our discussion tonight. When we come up with some tangible ways to fix that,
Gotcha.
and address some of the issues. That'll be part of not this section of the report, because this section I want it to be, well, I'm wondering if you think the moment would be appropriate here.
Well, I just know that you are throwing in a recommendation on departmental fee committee in this, so I don't think it hurts to have it multiple places.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll add some wording in this part of it before we jump into the fees and talk about how specific the APD was kind of, there's concern there about, and like I said, we'll get to kind of that here later tonight, but I think that's valid to have in the report. Anything else, APD?
So just so I'm sure I understand, Ryan, your concern is there needs to be something put in here about the composition of the CTC.
Correct, yes.
Well, composition, but also just kind of the dynamic, which was
process, right?
yeah.
That's
what you're saying?
They were selling the fee to
At least from my call, it sounded like that specific group had met multiple times as a group before they came here.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
So there's confusion.
right.
so
There
they'd
was-
already
yeah.
gotten the meetings. You know what I mean? That in theory were
Questions
designed
they'd
to
already
happen
been up
here through a process.
Yeah.
Right.
hammering them
Yes.
about that. And so when they got to this point, they're like, hey, why are we here again? Why are we doing that?
Exactly.
Exactly.
So I think it will
Exactly.
get fixed next year.
Yes. And that's problem number one, which we'll address. Yeah. But I will put a note in there. In here. All right. Human ecology. So, starting out talking about much of the discussion regarding the precedent of department fees, a lot of concerns to open the floodgates, a reasonable number of fees. Also, concern TFSC's process was not specifically designed for college-wide fees, and there's a lot of concern with transparency issues of departmental fees, as it would be difficult for a prospective student to determine the cost of attendance. Finally, okay, that doesn't make any sense. I already said finally. I need to fix that. I will. Additional concern is that the tuition fee structure working group recommended moving to a different tuition model where fees are eliminated and replaced by college by tuition levels, and that goes in the opposite direction of this recommendation. But it's a big transition between these two paragraphs. The group also acknowledged there's transparency in knowing exactly where students, I gotta have an apostrophe there, dollars are going, and that the dollars would go to most directly benefit the student, unlike college fee where student fee dollars would go to the department. That's doesn't happen here. And then finally, TFSC determined there are checks in place to prevent the floodgates from opening. Might make that a little less, not using a quote. Anyways. And then finally, ultimately, though, TFSC decided that according to new process rules to make sure the CTCs are followed and to respect their votes, there was not a group consensus on a motion for or against precedent department fees. TFSC acknowledged there was no established process, and this TFSC recommends that the future TFSC charge a special committee to create such a process. Anything high level before we get into the fees themselves? All right. Kinesiology, strong support was for the ability to establish career-based tracks. Important consideration was that absent additional revenue from the fee, the department would need to acquire online courses, the cost of which would be higher than additional costs due to a fee increase. Finally, there's strong support in the department for fee demonstrated through a previous student survey. And PFP. CDC supported the fee proposal with the need to maintain national prestige and quality of education. CDC members indicated there was a tipping point for faculty-student ratio and that further growth without funding increases. Sorry, there's been a couple times I've read something and be like, what was I doing when I wrote that? Anyways, bottlenecks start to occur. I'll fix that. And then while TFSC expressed concern of the dire need for the fee, CTC felt it was necessary, and TFSC believed the process was followed correctly.
Jeff, can I ask a question back up on
Absolutely.
the second paragraph on that page?
On, this one?
Yes.
Okay.
So you said thus the 2018 TFSC recommends that the 2019 TFSC charge a special committee to create such a process. I'm thinking back to our discussion last week. It was more decide whether we want to have departmental fees.
Okay, no,
and then,
that's a good point.
if that's the case, put a process together.
That's a good
Not
point.
assuming we'll have them, so we need a process. I did
Okay.
a lot of discussion around that.
Right. And to be able to formalize that discussion with some more input. Okay, that's a good point. Also, I'd say subcommittee, not special committee.
I saw some heads nodding, but I want to be sure I'm reflecting what you heard as well.
Yeah. All right. That is excellent. I'll make that change as well. Anything else I'm missing? I guess just generally capturing some of the thoughts. Like I said, there's more of a high-level overview of like the history of TFSC, and included in that history, I'm going to put this year and kind of the different way that we evaluated fees, and ways that we can change that, which we'll get to, and ways that, and I'm going to have that in the report. And then obviously we'll have a whole other section for tuition. Final question: is there any attachments that you want me to include? Other than I have the process document, we sent the deans, I have Provost Mason's letter, and I have minutes.
Do you also have the form proposals from the deans?
Yeah, well, so for some reason I was like we didn't include those last year. That
Yeah.
the president had them.
I always think it's a good practice to put them in
Just put it in there. Okay, go.
Yeah.
And then do you want to also include maybe I think we might have a lot of the slides and any answers that would have been typed out.
That's good, yeah.
And maybe a separate page with a link to recordings just a bunch of links. If the president wants to go back and watch something specifically, not sure if he would or
Well, the
not.
president, the other thing that it's beneficial is even if it's good to have a good report because next year's committee will be able to have all this information. Remember that 3,000-page document I sent you?
Yeah, because to be honest, this may be due Wednesday of next week.
Yeah.
So the president's not gonna have a lot of time to be, he can look
Yeah.
at it later. So we're gonna have to brief him, so whatever
Right.
you can
Any update?
put together in an email. Yeah, no, we're gonna wait and see what happens with the legislature. And so I think we got a little, at least agreement that we may need to wait till Friday, but they're gonna wait and see what happens tomorrow and Thursday. Thanks.
Good deal.
Anyways, but it, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's gonna happen.
And that's a quick, I mean,
Yep.
yeah, we'll be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree with Cindy. I think it'd be really nice to have all the information together, to expect the president to sit down and read. And
So what
it's not gonna happen, but it's really a historical record.
Yeah.
What I might, I might, and we haven't talked about this at all, but what if
So Sim,
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
yeah, this is
Have a
You need something.
preliminary report,
mhm,
and I can have that to you tomorrow.
just a little executive summary or something.
Just think, yeah,
Is that what
this
you
right
will
here,
do?
maybe.
Yeah, I
Could
think
this
you
be
should.
it?
Yeah, with a little
Yeah.
wordsmithing.
Yeah.
Cool. So too, I'll make the changes to this, and I'll send the collective
Yeah.
group.
I mean, we could. Then it will probably be done till next week or.
Yeah.
But
That makes sense. That's a good idea,
it'll
though.
be a quick turnaround. So it's good you're getting ahead of that and having all this done.
Good. Thank you.
Bonus points.
There you go. Steven.
I'm sending you a document with some suggested wording changes. I don't know if this is the best time to bring it up, but I think that I would really like to see some sort of a needs-based scholarship recommendation. I know that we had mentioned forming a departmental subgroup in this. I didn't know if this was the type of place you're wanting that or somewhere else.
Yeah, so I think there's a place for that in the report, but just probably not on the nitty-gritty of the department of the fee
Yeah, I
recommendation.
just want to reinforce that.
But
I
yeah,
think it's
I agree with
important to have it.
So I'll show you. I think you have access to last year's report because that was one of our. Sorry, I can't walk and talk at the same time. That was one of our big takeaways in our tuition proposal, or in our tuition recommendation was we said no more than 3% tuition increase. We support cost of living adjustment for all employees, blah, 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 and needs-based scholarships. So I think that'd be very appropriate. We can talk more about what that looks like. So, cool. Anything else I'm missing on here? All right, I'll make those changes and get that sent on. I'll turn it over to Cindy for the next item. Yes, yes.
I would like to share some handouts. Just letting you see how we compare. And we did front and back. This sheet is Big 12, old Big 12, and on the back is Kansas. So you can see what other regions, universities, public state universities, where they're at. And that's what, and it has a lot of history. Really, I know. And this includes privilege fees. So it's not just tuition, it includes tuition and fees. So then I'm gonna pass it out in yellow. Budget office was cleaning out some of the paper things we had. This is resident. And it is a pretty comprehensive list of universities. And then the blue will be the non-resident. I'm trying to do the people that I can tell them all. So some of you have seen these before, some of you have not. So what we try to do is, and I guess I'll just look at the Big 12, the white sheet. We just try to show a history, it goes back to 5, where we are in 18. K-State's at the top, and then we just try to show then where we are with the Big 12. That's the page I'm on. So this year we're 7 out of the 12. Not just Big 12, have A&M, Nebraska, Missouri also included. Doesn't include the privates, TCU, Baylor from the current Big 12, but it just kind of gives you a flavor of where we compare. Thank you. The others, again, tries to just compare K-State. There's at the very bottom is where it does averages and means and where we are. We're pretty much right at the average, which this is resident. We're 86th. We haven't changed from last year. We were 86 last year out of the total 172. But sometimes it's just kind of helpful just to see where we are with tuition. So the legislature will be returning. I've heard that the lady here, she was very helpful.
Yeah, Faith
They-
Little.
Yeah, because she is an intern, right, with the,
The majority
in
leader.
the appropriation, yeah. So I had heard that they're gonna be looking at omnibus tomorrow, trying to put together some bills. So as you know, the Board of Regents has restoration, remaining restoration of the cut that was imposed in fiscal year, for fiscal year 17. And she had mentioned restoration of 1%. And I think how I analyzed that one is they cut an average of 4. I think we were restored back to 3 or 2. And so it would be picking up another % that from what was cut. But we haven't seen any numbers yet. So we're still waiting. So I didn't know if there were any questions on any of this information or how you wanted to.
So the white page, that FY 18% change, is that 2.64 at K-State. So that
Includes privilege fees.
includes privilege fees. I just seems interesting because
We were 2.9,
2.9 and
and I
then
double checked it.
no, yeah, I'm not saying that. I was just
No,
curious
no,
how that 2.6 number comes about with
And
2.8.
we were 0, if I recall, we had 25-cent privilege fee chairs, is that right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
year?
Yeah.
Sarah, I think we had a 20, we were so close to a 0. I think it
I
was
see.
a 25-cent, and when you add those two together,
Got
it brought down the total.
That's what I think. So,
And they did not include the academic infrastructure fee, because if you included that, it would have been much higher.
yeah,
So I need to talk to whoever reports to, should we put it in? I don't know the definitions of I think this goes into the Chronicle, so we want to be apples to apples with other institutions, so we want to follow the guidelines. And if other institutions aren't including other types of fees, then we don't want to either, but anyway, we at least need to check into that.
I think this data is interesting, especially looking at that 05 to 18 comparison.
Yeah.
Well, it's fun. It's sad. I mean, that's,
Double,
yeah, we all know that, but it's interesting because you have something like Iowa State much higher than us in 2005. You know what I mean? It's just
yeah.
I don't have a point to make. I just think
It's,
that long-term data is really interesting.
and it would be interesting to compare state funding, what happened, you know, along with that, because it has a lot of influence on tuition in public schools.
And I think that'd be a great handout to have. Because I've tried to find that
That's
data.
good.
I've tried to find that data. It's really hard to find. And I still haven't found it.
From other states.
No, from ours of like how.
Oh my God, I'm like, you're not at my president. I did SDA. We've got it all over. Yeah, I have that presentation.
Yeah. No, I've seen the slide, not seen the numbers. Couple questions. So this does not include college fees of any sort.
This does not include college fees at least.
And is this also available as an Excel doc so we can sort data?
Absolutely. Do you,
All
Yeah. We have all of it next.
So these 27% change.
Yeah, do you want me to send it to Johnson or how do I do that?
Oh, great.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Actually, You could just send
I
it
can
to
do it, right?
You
TFS.
can do it, yeah.
Yeah, you can just send it out to everybody.
To that, now just that on
TFSC
your-
at KSU.edu, yeah.
I'll send that out tomorrow, right? You guys are gonna be waiting on it.
Thank you. I copied all of
Hey, you went down because of fees. I looked at that too, because I'm like, this can't be right. And I made Tara check it. And
Yeah,
it
so-
did, so it had to be the fees, so the tuition went up. But the privilege fees must have went down. And that's why they're showing pretty substantial.
Sure.
But I know their tuition wasn't, unless there's a mistake in the Chronicle, but I did have her check, because there are some negatives in
Nope.
the data. I mean, and we double checked all of them. So either the Chronicle data is not accurate, which could be, but that's where we got it from.
Still $700 up from K-State.
Yeah, still more than,
Yeah.
we used to keep it.
I agree.
The national
Here's
sports.
my toiletry chair.
Oh, it's, hi. It's
Right here.
I said we're making sure he doesn't.
Yo. So any questions for Vice President Bontrager?
Huh? Yeah, the old Big 12, and then we put bordering states, just to kind of,
The A&M's
Sort
in
of.
there.
A&M technically doesn't border, but yeah.
There you go.
You guys are getting it.
What, Big 12 at some point in time.
So Cindy, did University of Kansas's tuition go down last year?
No, it must have been their fees. And we can go back and look at their privilege fees. I'm sure their tuition went up,
It's $1,000.
Yeah.
but there was something, or the Chronicle, there's an error in what was posted in.
That just seems weird because we all sat together and
Yeah, no, I know the tuition increases.
I'll say they had a 1.5 or something like that, right? I mean, I remember that well.
Yeah. Yeah, but there were several negatives, and that we verified. Somebody went down. But anyway, 45%. I think it was Michigan. Some little small school.
Sure.
No,
All right.
Virginia State.
Sounds good. Any other questions? Pour through the data. Sounds like we'll have an Excel as well. That'd be great.
So hopefully we'll have something to report next week.
Yes. And then we're talking, and then we'll talk at the very end of the meeting tonight as well about how we're kind of tentatively scheduling this meeting on May 4th. May the 4th be with you. For, and that was Ethan Erickson's joke. I can't take credit for that. I'll have to text him later and tell him I recorded it. Yeah. It was funny though. I love jokes like that because you see the way the room responds. Half the room was like, "Oh God," I thought it was funny. Let me be clear. Jordan was like, "Oh God," I thought it was hilarious. So
I just knew you were gonna bring it up again.
yeah. You're saving your laugh for me. All right. Okay. Well, and then that's what I was saying. The meeting on the 4th would be kind of a lunch meeting to do a discussion phone legislatures, and the veto session. So.
I think somebody promised you lunch.
I was gonna say yes. I had. Well, it's funny because I talked to you on the phone. You're like, "Oh, I'll spring for lunch," and then Sue said, "I'll spring for lunch," and I was like, "What if we had lunch and dinner?" You know, we just had. Yeah. I had
Well,
two people.
Sue and I can argue over that, but it seems pretty reasonable. Brian and I were having a sidebar conversation, sorry.
You're great.
Purdue has been, sorry, close to my heart. Purdue's been getting a lot of visibility because they've frozen their tuition for about the last 7 years. And there was an article in Inside Higher Ed that they were going to freeze it for 3 more.
Yeah.
And then the current president's going to retire. And I'm like, well, good luck of getting a new president who's immediate. After freezing it for 10 years, you're going to have to do something. So,
What number are they?
What's your take as an administrator?
89.
on freezing tuition?
Yeah.
Well, they're making it up in numbers. I mean, they've got economy of scale. They've gone up in enrollment.
And specifically out of state enrollment, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the and I don't know Mitch Daniel. I wasn't even in the state when he was our governor, but he's increasing the
population of students. He's increasing the out-of-state students far more than when I used to be there. So he's doing good things, but he's playing with it. And you can't do that forever.
Yeah, it's a good talking point though.
It is a great talking point.
Yeah, so that's the thing. You probably read that article, right? Yeah. So what is there? They are kicking the can down the road on a lot of things. But at the same time, when he first proposed this tuition freeze, his advisors came to him and said, "You can't do this. This will never work because the students that we're competing for will go other places. Because if the other places are charging higher tuition, students will think, oh, that degree must be better because it's more expensive and worth more." So, but he went ahead and did it anyway, and they've increased the value of their degree. They've increased tuition by not tuition, they've increased enrollment, tuition revenue, just because they're enrolling more students. But also, it's apples and oranges because Indiana and Kansas and there's some state support for higher education, not at all equivalent.
Exactly.
So, well, the other thing we were talking about is if you guys want to be pointing to legislature and state to look at, if you look at the back, Florida, all the schools at the bottom are University of Florida is 6,381. Good school. You know what I mean? I guess for $6,000.
Pretty good scholarship, right? Are they the one that has the hope for whatever?
That's Georgia.
Georgia.
But
Florida also has a really good Pell Grant where like KU and like Mizzou, they'll cover all the costs for Pell Grant recipients, but they'll even cover, if you stay on campus, they cover housing for Pell Grant recipients.
They have a
So we have a wish list.
Yeah, and it's all those variables trying to juggle them to get the right composition of students. It's hard.
So Cindy, I just have a question. So I know that tuition freezes and things like that are seen as gimmicky, just because you need to make it up in later years. Why haven't we tried something like that?
I think a lot of it is when you don't have the state support. We've been covering all of the health insurance costs, which has been a big one, investments in our infrastructure, because we've got some failing chill lines and things like that we had to invest in. And then, what really hurts us is the salaries. So we have had to use enrollment increases in order to fund salary increases. And they haven't, it's on the webpage of the budget office. You can see the percent. It has not been a lot. And we're still at the bottom of the Big 12 with faculty and compared to peers. And we've been that way for as many years as I've worked here. So, we just have not had opportunity to justify and being able to do that. When we were growing, it was very modest, nice growth. And then I think there was a couple of years we had some big tuition increases, but the state came in very late in the session and cut. And President Schultz at the time, made a decision to add it on. So I think you're going to see more low, heavy index consumer price increases. We're not going to be at the 5. And we're going to try very hard this year. If we got restoration this year from the legislature, and 100% of that, it would almost cover our budget costs. And so we could seriously talk about a zero flat tuition increase, which we've never had that luxury before. But we just don't know where we're going to be at. And so really that's kind of where we are. If we can get that state support, then this could be one of the first year that we have the very lowest, if not to and I can't, it promises it's just Cindy talking. We haven't had a discussion with the president of the provost, but we could be very close, I think, to getting it to a very low or zero tuition rate. But it would require investment from the state.
Sure. And market that like crazy.
So I was gonna say we're gonna wrap up this conversation so we don't have actual numbers or anything. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, you mentioned that we are still at the bottom when it comes to university faculty salaries. And then, so what are we spending our money on that other Big 12 universities aren't and are able to offer their colleges additional faculty increase?
I think, Steve, a lot of it is just when we look at our revenue, it's not apples to apples. We know what KU, what their in-state versus out-of-state. And then I heard Purdue probably been recruiting out-of-state. We're very dependent on in-state students. And so compared to out-of-state, we don't generate as much revenue. And again, we've always struggled even comparing with KU. We've never, if you look at staffing levels in departments, we're not that much different in student size. And especially a couple of years ago, we're very comfortable. But everywhere you look, they have more people doing the work. And a lot of it is to do because of the revenue that comes in through out of state. And I think that's what we're gonna hear maybe from here on, is that we really have to look at that. We know what our mission is, and it's to support Kansas. But and for us to be able to compete with what other universities have done, I think we're gonna have to look at that next. But anybody else have some comments on that?
All right. Well, I think I'm gonna keep you on the hot seat though. Sorry, Cindy. We can talk about fee review. Would be great. So.
Do you want me to share? Okay, now this is, we'll see what Mr. Accountant next to me thinks. But so what I had promised Jack, and I apologize, I don't think I'm gonna have enough because I think there's more than 15 here.
Gotcha. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm gonna give you better.
So we may need to share a little bit. But this is a report that came right out of our accounting system. And I visited, this is Human Ecology's college fee report for this fiscal year up through today, or actually last night, whatever posted. And I checked with Rita. They really do a good job in that. If you see in that first line, I'll wait till all of these, no, we're not gonna have enough. For sure. But that project tells us that that's the project that you can almost see the fee at the end. So that's where it comes in. And then these are expenditure objects that the state chart of accounts requires us. And so it just, current period would be April, year to date, and inception to date. Inception's for grants. So this is not a grant. So those are going to be the same. And then if there's any encumbrances, and then our total year to date. And so that you can see they've spent on unclassified, which most likely that would be either faculty or some kind of unclassified professional staff, student salaries, and the benefits. And then you can see by category the other items that they have spent on that fee. And then at the very bottom, the third page is where it shows revenue. So the charges have come in $939,000 for the whole college fee. Now what they do is they move it around, because I could have done this report by department. So they will move the revenue probably from the dean's department to other departments to spend. But this is, and when I reached out to Rita, she said the dean does a PowerPoint presentation that he shares how they've spent this revenue and with students and faculty. So it sounds like they are very transparent in showing how this revenue is being utilized within their college.
So is this just specific to the current $20 red hour human ecology?
Correct. In the restricted fee fund. Yeah, so it's just their $20.
Cindy, I'm not finding 900,000 anything on this page. Where am I not?
It's on the very third page under revenue, the very last box. And it's R2050 charge education.
Yep, year to date.
And year to date. And then we're showing transfers in and out, but that's going to be back and forth between the college departments. But anyway, so that's what the other two objects are. So I don't know, Jack, if this is helpful.
That's very helpful.
But this is something that It's available, and like you said, the college does reports and shares out information to you.
Well, I think this helps us too, especially if those are all, the accounts those are state-based, like your coding, right? It's just a state, like Kansas, yeah.
So it gets pretty detailed.
Yeah.
And then some of the, it's like, I wasn't sure what some of the abbreviations even stood for, but, we definitely have all that.
Well, and I think this would be helpful for us to have before. That's kind of what I think, as Jonathan and I talked, like having TFSC review this basic thing and say, let's put a star next to, like, I started consultant travel, right? I'm not trying to make a big deal of it now, but just like, $13,000, like what, who was that? What did I go to? Things like that. Just would be curious to hear what the dean has to say and things like
They
that.
have someone in.
Right. Well, yeah, I was going to say to me or something like that. So.
Yeah.
So previously, I think Jack and others, Trenton saw, maybe engineering, they said, this is how much we brought in.
Yeah.
This is how much we spent, and these are the categories on which we spent it. And I don't look at these, so I'm struggling.
Yeah, this is going to be more detailed. So they probably took this and summarized it and put it into categories that made more
Which is helpful because this is tough for me to read. But where does it tell me how much they brought in and how much they spent? Are they banking a lot of these, or is it coming in? I'm on page 3, darn it.
You should have a page. Well, it's page 2, but it's page 3 and it's on the back. Front, back, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
And so if you look at the expenditure total, so it's not an income statement, or it's not a balance sheet or whatever. So you're not going to see the net. So you're going to see total expenditures of $771,000, and that's right above the revenue line of $939. And so then that's how much revenue that came in, but it looks like they may have transferred out a little more. So then there's the other revenue is $836, and so then you just track those two. So they're bringing in more revenue than they are spending. So that's a good thing. And this is only 1 year, so it's not going to show. So it may not be a good thing.
I was on your way.
But as we look at it from accountants, we don't like overspending. So,
I don't want them to overspend, but.
And it's only April, so they still have some more time to spend for this year. So, kids payroll, they probably have.
Because it all comes in at once.
It's not until June.
So, no, this is not. This is a restricted fee. It's not like tuition. So this gets deposited as students pay.
I'm going to send most students pay early in the semester, so it's in there already.
So there'll be some in August, September, they'll dribble in, and then there'll be a big influx in January, and it'll keep dribbling in.
Yeah.
Because you can, there was a $150 adjustment.
So you just
Because it
mentioned,
goes backwards too.
sorry to get into the accountant stuff, you just mentioned that this is only when people pay. So is this to show the accrual?
So they probably do have the accrual. So they may have, and I can run it as a cash. Thank you for noticing. You are so
Okay.
because we can run it as a cash basis too.
Can I ask one more quick question to make sure my engineering mind's understanding this? So I get that the total expenditures are $771,582. You say the fee generated $939,520.
Correct.
Okay.
Well,
and what's the 836 number?
It may be assessed. So we need to, I ran it as a accrual. I should have did it as a cash basis.
Okay.
I apologize for all of you non-accountants. I'm really not one
Yeah,
CPA
my-
either. And so this is why we have Fran. So anyway,
Okay.
go ahead.
So which number tells me exactly how much the
The
fee
2050 is how much has been assessed or charged to the student. And that should be also the cash really coming in.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So a couple things that, this is
And
very
this may
nice.
not work.
This is very nice, this is very thorough. Two things that I think would help future TFSC understanding this is if it was like a summary of like what this meant. So that could maybe even come from the college or like the university, but then you'd also have to vet the summary and have someone to consult with if you have a question over a specific item. Would there be a person would there be a particular office we could have someone who is unbiased say, okay, we sign off that this particular money, such as the transfer in, transfer out. Is it, ultimately, what we want to get at is what the fee was okayed for, that is what the fee is getting spent on.
So you want an audit, and that this isn't what this is doing. What this is doing a quick, easy report that's available that we can run to show you and what cash has been collected and how it's been spent.
Yeah, I would say I like this specifically since it'll tell me how much the fee raised and how much is spent. I think those are the two big numbers that we care about.
I always think you really should ask the college to provide this information.
Right.
Because they have the details, they understand. But if you're wanting a different report that is from a third party, this could be used just to compare, I guess. But I mean, I still think the best data you're gonna get is coming from the college.
But maybe I misheard. I thought he was asking for defining what E11176 is. You know what I mean? That's a university level account, isn't it, right? Or is it specific to the college?
Yeah, this is state of Kansas Chartered Accounts Object Code information.
At least if I understood what he said, I think he was asking for somebody to define what all the accounts are. You know who's not.
I thought he wanted somebody to check off and say, yes, this is accurate. And it's going to be difficult. I mean, we're going to say, yes, this is what got posted into because this is our official accounting system. Now, did something get posted incorrectly? Possible. Because they could have charged it to the wrong account. Or
Yeah, no, I'm seeing back to Jack's thing of, okay, let's look at consulting fees. I want to ask the college, what did you spend that consulting fee on? And I also want to make sure that that's actually what it got spent on. And maybe it's just I think that's, maybe I come at it from a more audit. I like the checks and balances. I like the independence of that sort of thing. But I just think it's a good process. But yeah, no, I'll take this on.
And the only thing I would say is that as we've compared audits versus the financial statement, essentially, what
this
is what you call
is a
it?
revenue expense, so
Revenue
it's only 1 year at a time. I mean, and of course, in the accounting system, you can drill down into the transaction. You're wanting to know from the transaction, who's the vendor that we paid to these consultant fees. I mean, and all of that information is there, but I still think this would be a good tool to start with and then really get the information from the college.
Because my challenge is, you look at our proof fee audits, it's a PDF that says compliance or not. You know, and that's not really, I think, what this group is looking for.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm wrong, but part of the thing, the conversation we had with Steve Lefevre, our internal auditor, is that we've never established which charge of accounts are acceptable for fee dollars, which are not. Right? I mean, we haven't said.
Well, I think
One way or another.
at some point, the deans have come in and said, this is how we're going to spend this fee.
Right.
So that's really all we have.
Yeah.
Unless they've come back and said, now we want to revise how we spend. I mean, and that's all we would have is basically, you know, what they tell us. So that's why those reports are important to have for historical, so we can go back and see, you know, if that's a concern. But, you know, I think this is straight out of our university's accounting system. It took me, once I found the project, it didn't take very long, like seconds to run. It's not 100% perfect, but it gives you a lot of the information that I think you're looking for. And then we can just run these like annually or something and then just provide them. Like when you start next year, Jordan, if this is just information that you want to look at, I don't know.
And then I think it drives the conversation to say, okay, so like there's a question that, you know, Trim may have a question about one line, I got a question about another, and that informs our thing. We did the review.
So the audit that happens is basically upon regulations the states have. So you can't pay for alcohol. I mean, there's certain things that you can't do with state funds, and so those are what's reviewed and audited. But they're not going to know that, oh, you didn't allow travel, for example, if that was restricted.
Right.
That wouldn't happen, but there will be checks on the vouchers just to make sure they're complying with state rules on funding that
I think it takes,
pretty broad.
takes a bit to get through this, but I think this is good information. So
And could you query, for instance, College of Engineering has had multiple fees over the years. Could you query all the fees in the College of Engineering, or would that have to be a separate query?
So what I would recommend is we work with the business officers to explain what we're doing. 2 colleges that I can tell use one project for the fee. I didn't look in engineering, but we would want to work with their business officers and see. I look like ag did not do it that way. So they may be transferring it into other funds in other departments. So we would probably want them to coordinate it so it's easily able to get a report on, so it's all in one project, or somehow we knew where they were spending the money, and if they know that you want to track it. Yeah, you can visit with that, but I'm not sure that it's set up that way now to answer that.
I'm trying to think who might have been on the budget advisory committee. Trenton, were you with Jessica on the budget advisory committee?
No, it
Was
was.
it before you?
It was.
I don't know, John.
Just gonna check. I never was.
Vice president. But that was kind of towards.
Well, the point, it doesn't matter, but the point I was gonna make is that committee pushed Cindy and I over and over again. We want more detail, more detail, more detail. And poor Ethan kept giving them more detail, more detail. And then finally they threw their hands up and said, we don't want to get down to this level. So my point is, you decide whether you want this detail, because human ecology is probably pretty simple. Businesses and engineering is going to be a lot more complicated. Maybe you guys are a lot smarter than me, but I don't like this. It's just difficult. But just be sure you know what you're asking for. I'm not saying don't get it. You're probably better with spreadsheets than I ever will be. But it's a lot of detail. And just be sure that that's what you want. It's just my only caution. But this was a group of people that finally said, no more. I don't want any more. They just threw up their hands and said no more. But we kept giving it to them until they said that. So you can have the same way.
I think if I'm understanding correctly, the biggest thing this group wants is a good setup process for reviewing a fee, because the business professional advantage fee hasn't been reviewed and it's been in place for so long. And so I think we're trying to figure out a good way of setting up that structure. And I don't know if this is a step towards that.
So to me, I kind of like seeing this because it comforts me knowing that they're not runaway spending on things that aren't central to the focus of their fee. I mean, the $12,000 for a consultant, while that is interesting, and I'd like to know more, that's $12,000 out of a fee that generated almost $1 million. And so to me, that's 0.1%, I think. So
That's
that's not super concerning.
Well, and I think this is good as an appendix. I think there definitely
Yeah.
need to be some sort of a written thing, because not everyone's going to have 5 money accounts like I would. But
Yeah.
I'm stepping out one more time.
I would say if I saw $100,000 worth of things, or probably $50,000 worth of things where I was starting to raise an eyebrow, then I'd, there'd probably be worth more questions being asked. Yeah. How does everybody else feel on that? Provost Mason raised the concern that we may be getting too much information by requesting this.
Yeah.
And it may not be exactly what we're looking for.
Challenges, I don't know what we are. I mean, it's been tough to figure out what exactly we should be.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of agree with you, Jonathan. Like, I like being able to look and see under these different line items what was spent. But then again, like, I really don't feel like doing this for every college, for every line item. I would start missing the things that should stick out to me, because I'd be intaking so much information, and I'm not trained to look at these, like, kind of like Provost Mason was saying. I have no context.
I would say too. So I agree with that. I think it is a lot of information. I think that this is meant to supplement what would also be a presentation. The other thing is, I think that's the beauty of doing a 3-year fee review, where you can really dive in deep for 3 weeks in the fall. Well, it takes longer than that, but
You could get this every year, and then that third year,
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
like WordPress.
Yeah.
And it's also helpful to see what revenue came in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I,
Yeah.
okay. How much money are they? And
I
how's that
think-
compared to what they?
I think this is the right direction to move in.
I'm liking it too.
So I'll tell you what, this is just kind of revealing my hand, I guess, is that like our plan, Jonathan and I's plan is to meet with Jordan and Ryan, which co-chair the committee next year, and develop a timeline. So that would be really helpful for you and the new provost, and essentially to say, hey, kind of here's where we're putting things in the fall and the spring, and if we can't come up to some conclusions on, if we can have, these by a certain date, things like that, we work with it. So it's not like be a lot more organized that way than I think that's good.
Really, it's gonna depend on what you guys think,
Yeah.
to be honest, and how you want to move forward.
Yeah.
So you just let us know, and we can work with the colleges to try to make it so it's easy to run the reports, and
You bet.
but if they're helpful or not, that you guys just let us know.
All right. Any other kind of comments on the fee review process? If not, let me write up an actual process. I'll write up an actual schedule. Well, not schedule to the extent that I'm talking, but schedule with here's kind of where we tentatively put colleges, and we can evaluate that, change that, and we can kind of look at that. So I'll have that to you by May 1st. Work for everybody?
So we're meeting next week at 6.
Yeah, next week at 6, and then we'll talk.
Definitely next week, and then we'll figure out, we need another meeting.
Sorry, I know it's dead week, but we're all alive, so.
Dead week, oh my gosh. That's crazy.
All righty. Okay.
I want to start celebrating.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
My celebration will be size.
What'd you say, sir?
Yeah.
All right. Unless, so I guess is there general agreement that this is kind of the direction we should move in, and we can kind of get a more legitimate process? Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I'm not way off base. Okay, we got exec here in 27 minutes.
25.
25 minutes. Cool. Yeah, give it to you, Brian. So the last thing I want to talk about is improves the new proposal process. So let me step through this, elaborate. I started doing some writing, kind of like here's what, here's the new process stuff. And I realized, I think I still want to outline kind of here's how I want to solve some problems. So I've kind of broken things down. I've got Stephen's letter up here, by the way. I'll pull it up in a second. Problem 1, problem 2, problem 3. Problem 1, of course, is that the CTCs are designed to discuss and, and have debate and not be 100% sold from the get-go one way. It's not supposed to sell the fee to TFSC. Problem 2 is that TFSC should offer more than just process consideration. Might need to look at some more long-term things like a land grant mission, things like that. And then problem 3 is that the selection process of CTCs is going to ensure that they're representative. And one of the things we talked about this year is how we had CTCs come and sell a fee to TFSC. I'm not so sure that that was because they were hand-selected by a dean, but I think Cindy and I have had a lot of good chat about how I think it's kind of a product of the timeline, too, that we're catching students who have already had these discussions late in the game. So I want to address problem number 3, but I was going to say just my 2 cents at it is that the issues we had this year are more than just how people were selected. So, and we will talk about that. I'm not saying we won't. That's kind of my thought there. So let me real quickly, I'll step through. So then problem 1, which ironically a lot of like the issues that we had written on the board, I kind of grouped into here. I think it's a product of the timeline issue. 2, is there a way that TFSC can express an opinion on the fee? 3, TFSC have a high-level overview meeting on each fee prior to making deans and department heads present. And then 4 is more data. So I think one of the things I was thinking about this year is actually, as I was writing the fee proposal or the fee recommendations is that we did sit down before the deans came present. We started the CTCs and asked questions. What if we sat down before and expressed some of our concerns, essentially? Is that not making a decision on the merits, but that could be where we could express, per Stephen's point, some long-term, or not long-term, but I guess more high-level overview of like, they were concerned about access in the college of XYZ because of previous fee increases. This is kind of a concern we have. And then when we charge TFSC, that's kind of on the table as, here's something that we see as a concern.
Isn't that kind of what the questions that we sent them?
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of what they did?
Well, yes, but it came out as very.
He's saying be more direct.
Be more direct. I was gonna say. Yeah. See, I was indirect in saying that, which in of itself. So yeah, James, 100% agree. But the challenge is, we said probing question, and you got a good answer to it. I'm not saying that's bad, but it's good to have good answers. But I think that it's also good to have more question and then also, okay, here's my general concerns.
So, for instance, I talk about needs-based scholarships. Instead of me just presenting a resolution and saying, this is something to keep in mind, say, I went and I talked with your scholarship officers and they allocate, they give all their need money towards first generation, which is good, but they don't take into account that there are people who are not first generation that have needs, something more direct such as that.
You would say that would be upfront, presented to the CTC, as opposed to
just presenting a resolution.
As opposed to you standing there and during a CTC meeting, which is just more effective, more direct. Is that overstepping?
I guess I just have an issue with that, in that TFSC would now be inserting their opinion before the deliberations of the CTC. And really, to me, that runs contrary to the point of having those CTCs that have those conversations and make those decisions independently of TFSC.
No, that's fair.
And I think maybe something that we're going to have to look at is, why are each of the groups together? Or like, not why, but like, what type of perspective does each group offer?
Yeah.
And instead of trying to make one particular group change their perspective to see another group's, understand that CTCs are usually going to be more general in nature, more merit-based, like the merits of the proposal, whereas TFSC can maybe get more into the philosophical weeds about plan, grant, mission, and thinking about the small person in the college, not just the people who are around the table, those sort of things.
So Ryan, my response to that, I guess, would be that they hear the one side from the deans, and we would simply provide the other side.
But aren't they the other side?
Well, they're the decision makers. My concern is if you don't have kind of the other side to say, hey, what about these challenges in an official manner? Would they be considered fully? I guess. Because like to some extent, I know we've kind of gone around the block, not you and I, but everybody has about how dean has to sell their fee, and so they're trying to garner support. And I guess it's easy to fall into that, ability to say, okay, here's what our, yes, I agree based on this presentation from the dean. And if we were to be able to say, here's probably another consideration that individual may not be bringing. I don't want to say it's always going to be a TFSC versus the deans, but I don't think it's like that. But I think there might be some value in just providing that input.
I feel like we're doing the thinking for them, honestly, because I feel like you talked about, will the deans provide their side? They're the students that were selected to make that decision on behalf of students. Who are we? Just another body of students that are more qualified than them? And I feel like us making a recommendation to them when they're the ones that should be, having those discussions and coming up with those opinions, I really struggle with that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but
I was saying not a recommendation, but yeah.
I will jump on his point and agree with him, because I think for us to truly be the other side, we would need to provide a lot more information in terms of why our concerns should be valued. Because I think if the members of the CTCs don't value our concerns, then they're just going to side with their dean and be like, yeah, what he's saying makes sense.
But wouldn't that happen if we didn't say anything at all?
True.
Would it maybe be better if we had, instead of the TFSC playing the devil's advocate, maybe trying to open up the door to people in that college who might not be in support of a fee to have a more active role in like maybe providing a counter argument to it? Yeah, that might be a possibility. And then maybe it's just something that we can say, hey, if you're a member of TFSC and if you have significant concerns, feel free to come and present those concerns, but don't try to use it to just steer conversation. Just ask a question and without a question.
Well, one second. I was just saying that was something that we had talked about as well with membership, where, if you've got, I compared it to a ranking member on a, Senate committee where you've got individuals who are either for or against, and, if you have a college vote that's 60-40, but then 100% of your membership is for it. Sorry, Jordan, was to your point. That's a problem. I think that's problematic. Sarah.
I was thinking that maybe if you wanted a voice that maybe brought different perspective, instead of having us as TFSC give that perspective, maybe have the TFSC representative from that college be a voting member on there and not let them vote on the merits. And does that make sense?
What do you mean?
And let them be a member of the CTC because they are from that college.
Aren't they already a member?
No, if they're
only if they're
a caucus,
only if they're appointed or a caucus member.
Really, I thought the TFSC rep was a voting member on the CTC.
Yeah, TFSC reps a member of the CTC.
Yeah,
sorry.
They are?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I did that.
Because you are an engineering, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Well,
He's also a senator of the college.
I feel like the only real way to expose like the students of the college tuition committee to the concerns that TFSC has, and that like the other side is how we're kind of framing this, is to have them present in this room when we're discussing those things. I don't I'm just like kind of playing around with this, but like what would it look like instead of having a separate college tuition committee, if it instead when we're discussing a college's fee, there's more representatives from that college? I don't know if that gets kind of hairy or messy, but I think that we have them in this room and the students presenting and they're in this conversation, and we have a completely different one and they're completely separate. And I feel like they need to be more joined together.
Separate votes, joint conversation.
Maybe.
Well, and the other thing is with that, part of that is a project. Cindy, I think you just made a really good point about this a couple weeks ago, so I'm going to keep repeating it. But the timeline is that if TFSC and CTC were together and having their discussion in December.
Yeah, when they were having it.
When they were
because
having
they were
it.
following the old process.
Right.
I think the deans were. They weren't aware, so they were talking with students, and at least that's the impression that I heard on the kinesiology. Yeah. That they did have the more robust, if you will,
discussion
regarding the merits of the fee. And by the time they got to you all, they'd already hashed through everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the impression I got from kinesiology.
If that could happen in here.
So just having the understanding and laying out to the dean so they're aware of what's expected for next year, in your mind that, we want to be involved with those discussions right from day one. Mm-hmm. Right? Is that really what? And then trying to figure out the membership is important too. Mm-hmm. We don't want just all of the ambassadors or whatever. I mean, we want a diverse, nice.
And if there's going to be more fees, you're probably going to have to look at a different structure.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like what happened this year, the timeline things moving through. If you move it earlier, it's still not going to. There still won't be enough time to do it the way.
To have all the different.
Yeah, to have a TTC and then have TFSC, talk about the same thing. And so.
Yeah. And that's why I think one of the things is, and that's one of my challenges as well is you charge the CTC in December if the fee is not going to go through the provost, but I think that's what we got to talk about, that timeline too. I know it's dangerous waters, but I think we got to bring that deadline up a little bit. Like proposals due by the 1st of November or something like that. I know that's early, but
yeah. Yeah, that is early, or at least by the end of the fall break,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or the fall semester.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. One of the. I mean,
Because they would.
I'm sensitive
They
to
should
that.
know.
They should know what
They're-
they're asking for.
And then what do you provost expects? I mean, that's. Another unknown.
So I guess the other. So I guess here's some different thoughts on. I guess Ryan and Jonathan, I'm going to call you out specifically. I'm just curious because you kind of represent that other side of definitely what I was thinking is, do you think it's appropriate for TFSC to ask the questions on the fees? To continue to do that.
I'm gonna go with yes, because I think it gets the discussion started and serves as a point, because it's always tough to get that first question out.
Yeah.
But part of me wonders how much those committee members really care about the questions that are asked, in terms of, would they have asked a question about needs-based scholarship as something that they value personally in their, college or department? Because I don't think some of the things that we value as a committee, every single student feels like, yeah, we're gonna know about that. So
I feel like I would add, though, that I think that kind of your first point, Jonathan, that it does spark a conversation at the very least. And even if, they're not the most passionate people about needs-based scholarships, I think that it's still something to consider.
Yeah.
And I really don't see that as us overstepping or stepping on toes at the CTC, because anybody can ask a question, right? And I think that James had a good point in saying that you can't express concerns in those questions. And if the CTC doesn't feel like the dean, paid their due diligence to answer the question to the effect that they wanted, then that's still a concern that's on the table, right?
And and I think that was kind of where we saw with, like, a perfect example of this would be, engineering, where I think TFSC probably cared a lot more about one component than the CTC did, such as life.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe keep the same model we had this year, which is asking the questions, and then.
The one thing I would change is I would allow CTC to also ask questions during that initial phase. So I think if you bring both CTC and TFSC together, and say, here's the proposal, here's what you're going to go through over the next few weeks. Let's look through the proposal. Let's all get together a list of questions. It creates that sort of like, we're all sending this, we're all invested in these questions, we're sending it to the dean. And then it's up to you how much you want TFSC to be involved, but at the very least, I think CTC and TFSC should both be in a joint meeting, proposing questions, making sure you're getting questions from both groups.
I think that's more beneficial for a dean too, to say, the only change, I guess, from this year in that regard would be that we bring a CTC on a week early before the dean. That's a great idea, Stephen. Yeah. CTC on a week early before the dean and say, okay, here's kind of our general discussion amongst the crew of students. And then dean's here, standard questions, plus CTC questions, or the group's questions.
Yeah, CTCers really never asked questions this year. Never really had that opportunity.
Because they were
But I
already-
guess
they were already
I
settled on the
also
fee.
feel like they're very clear about where this is.
Yeah.
I think they already did it.
That also might be helpful, Miranda. I think that's a good point as well, is to bring the CTCs in and say, here's how this works.
I think that's
100%.
Because having that conversation prior to with just the students in the room for both committees, I think could bring up concerns that we are not thinking of in this room through that conversation. And that's what I would like to see.
I think it's really cool to have a relationship with the members of CTC too, because one time I was out here studying and skipped TFSC, and all they did was say, who are those people in that room, and why are they asking those questions, and why do they not think our fee is important? And I was like, what are they saying about, you know what I mean? So it's like, I think building that relationship kind of makes us feel like we're on level playing field.
But in a lot of ways, after watching PFP, both leadership of PFP and the students go through that process, I was like, we really aren't in the same playing field. Like in terms of how we view, I think, K-State and the student experience, because in my mind, they were so foundationally siloed from the university and from every, I don't know, it was really interesting to think about their perspective on their academic program and how it relates to the college at large, or the college at large and the university at large, because I felt like I don't know. I just thought it was interesting, and in a lot of ways, I didn't feel that connectivity like I do, or like I did with every other CTC that we met with.
Yeah. I always wondered what other programs are like that. Are there others?
Yeah.
They're the ones who
There
are
are,
talking
yeah.
about this.
And a lot of times I wonder, like,
How well are we?
like PFP is one of those programs where it's super small, it's really close knit, and like I questioned the amount of groupthink going on between program leaders and students in the undergraduate degree program.
Yeah, because the students do have a really close relationship with their
Which is like
faculty and
great, and that's
really
a good thing. But if you're getting your information from an administrator or a group of administrators who are all faculty, and that's your only source of information and perspective, then that's guiding the way that you think about it.
It's not encouraging critical thinking.
Yeah. So I guess that's, I don't know.
Some pretty good critical thinker. I thought that they were graduate level, I guess.
But yeah, also one of the graduate level students I did not feel like was like almost like shaming students for having like a bad GPA, or like I just felt like that was.
Well, I think
that was teetering the line of like being a bit too exclusionary for my liking, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, I think with that situation, it kind of goes back to why we need a subcommittee to look at departmental fee, because like if that was the whole college, that kind of siloed
It's a
kind
different
of
story.
program, yeah, it's a whole different playing field, and so I think that can be addressed by the subcommittee of playing issues.
Well, Jordan, have fun.
And right.
And Renee, I'll say. Well, I meant, yeah, I was just. All right. So let's talk about. Sorry, Ryan. We have 2 more minutes. Does anybody have any quick fix solutions for the selection process? One of the things I heard was at-large application.
Well, and another thing that I heard during one of our meetings is should there be a forum of each particular constituency?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it, but there were times where like an entire group was missing, and I felt like it was obvious that voice was missing.
And I don't think not having a solidified multicultural student organization within your college is a good excuse for not having multicultural representation on the CTC.
I agree.
You think it is not a good excuse?
Yeah, I think it's a horrible excuse. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe one of the things that we need to consider when we're looking at the representation is we say like we'll have at least one. Maybe we need to appoint 3 or 4 for each area, and then at least one is there, hopefully at every meeting. Or like looking at kind of the numbers, that side of things.
It'd be awesome to guarantee a Pell Grant student on every CTC.
So and that's the challenge, right? It's like, how do we have specific criteria, but then
have enough cheeks in the seats.
Well, and fully representative where it's not handpicked.
Yeah.
Because who knows who is XYZ? Well, the dean.
Yeah.
That's our concern, right? And that's fine. I get that.
You just, it's a criteria.
Oh, it's like jury duty. That's CTC duty of work. Doesn't matter. That's awesome. All right.
So Jack, I'm gonna make one last comment before we move on real quick. I really like Trent's thought about making sure we have a Pell Grant recipient on there. And what if we were to accomplish that by looking at taking whatever that first lump of students was, that it was, like 5 students at large. If we were to, because we've already got the 1 student from each
grade or whatever class,
whatever you want to call it, yeah. And what if we were to take that and kind of turn that into more of a needs-based focus group? And
yeah, I just know how. I mean,
because I feel like I feel like those 2 groups were the exact same.
And then you can't like single them out in meeting
Right.
unless they choose
Yeah.
to.
Kai, I'm here representing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Of course,
Yeah, like,
yeah.
yeah, the Paul Grant on here, he said it's a similar sort of thing, so. I don't know, that's above my pay grade to figure out how that works.
Yes.
All right. Well, we got our first big chunk of that process discussion on the way. Let me do some writing there. I'll have that for you next week.
Reach out, they can't be on the committee.
That's what I was thinking too. The people in this room that are on CPCs are the ones with the privilege of like having to work at night.
So true.
All right. Okay, well, just the time. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you. So, see you May 1st.
Okay.
So, meeting on Tuesday, May 1st at 6 p.m. here.
That's already skipped.
Yeah. And real quick, if everybody could, yeah, it's already scheduled. And if everybody, we have calendars on real quick. May 4th at noon.
Is Sue doing something that day? Do you know?
Sue's doing on the 9th.
Oh, is it the ninth? Okay.
She plans on being
What's on the 4th?
May 4th at noon for a lunch meeting following the legislature,
In case we need to.
in case we need to have it. Yeah.
Is that here or where?
It'd probably be JP's, I assume. But I don't know what we're doing for lunch, but whatever. We'll have to figure that out. But yes, here.
I'm in class then.
In class then.
What would it look like if we shaded to either 11:30 or 12:30?
I'll do a doodle poll. But I'm just curious. I mean, I just was, yeah. As long as I thought I'd be on that one. That's okay. I'll set a doodle poll for that time. I'll work with Tara and Craig. All right, everybody.